Hi, I'm Ravi. I'm a longtime practitioner of the spiritual path, and today I want to share some insights around spirituality. So the topic for today is structures that serve our evolution. So before we talk about what we mean by structures, let's talk about what we mean by evolution. So the evolutionary paradigm came into our collective consciousness of humanity in the 19th century when Charles Darwin wrote his book on the origin of the species, and he basically made an observation that life forms on the planet went through this process of evolution from he didn't conceive of them from lower to higher forms. He just conceived of them as the fact that there's this process of change that's happening that leads from um, uh, life forms like bacteria to Galapagos Island turtles to this process of continuous change that leads from less complex to more complex life forms. And humans also went through this evolutionary process, going from the unicellular life forms to invertebrates and vertebrates, then eventually to monkeys, and then eventually to the modern human that we know today. So when he introduced this paradigm, a lot of people from a lot of different disciplines took notice of it because it was really novel idea. And in the spiritual field, a bunch of thinkers started to think, hey, actually, maybe we evolve spiritually as well. Maybe this is a useful paradigm for understanding spiritual growth and evolution in the world as well. So before then, spirituality had kind of had this cyclic view of this kind of never ending cycle of unending revolving around the same thing just happening over and over again. This is to be clear in the domain of Indian Buddhist and Hindu spirituality that I'm referring to, but we see similar ideas in a lot of other cultures. This concept that history is cyclical in a sense, and that there's no change forward. But spiritual thinkers were influenced by this Darwinian idea. They started to think, hey, actually, maybe we evolve spiritually as well. Maybe the universe itself is going through this process of spiritual evolution. And Sri Aurobindo was one major figure who brought this idea to light, but there were others that found this idea appealing. And now it's a pretty widespread view that a lot of spiritual teachers and thinkers have, that we observe the process of increasing change and complexity and growth towards not a biological idea of increased biological complexity solely, but actually increased spiritual growth and depth. And the spiritual view of this evolutionary process is that the universe is evolving in a direction, and that direction is actually going to deeper spiritual possibilities rather than just material possibilities. So this notion of evolution, it actually lines up with what we think of evolution looking like in our own lives, because this paradigm sees our own lives as kind of not separate from, but part of this larger cosmic process of evolution. So the basic idea of people growing from children to adults, and then from adults to elderly people with wisdom, and that's the normal process of evolution in human life. And if you believe that in life after death, then you might go on to experience successive lives and learn successive lessons. So that is what evolution might look like in an individual life. And if we're on a spiritual path, then we grow spiritually as well. We have deeper and deeper spiritual experiences. We grow in wisdom. We grow in capacity to love others, to care about others, to serve through our capacities in a career sense, or in a vocational sense in our lives, in our hobbies, in our emotions. So this process of evolution and growth is not just something that's restricted to the macro level of species change or even technological change, which a lot of people think of as the main evolutionary process taking place, but just our ordinary lives of growing uh, deeper and deeper into ourselves as people also is this evolutionary change that is actually one with the larger evolutionary progress of the world. So again, this is not something that you can absolutely prove, but it's a compelling lens if you're drawn to it. Um, so then here's where we get to the idea of structures that I brought up at the beginning. Every structure in our lives can be thought of as to whether it facilitates evolution or holds back evolution. So when I say structures, I really mean uh, every part of life that we can identify in a conceptual way can be thought of as a structure. So if you have one job versus another job, there might be one job that facilitates more of this spiritual growth than another job, which might be more soul deadening or more even harmful to the larger environment or something like that. And then we would say that, well, this job is a life structure that we live inside of that facilitates our evolution. This job is another job that has a less beneficial impact on our evolution. So we can look at the different structures that our lives are contained within, because there are so many of these structures that mediate our lives. Uh, yeah, there's so much complexity in how our lives are set up, and all of these structures contribute to whether we're evolving spiritually or not evolving spiritually. And so this gives us a criterion that we can even ask beyond whether something is good or bad, because at the kind of um, good and bad is definitely a useful distinction that we need to be clear of. We don't want to lapse into immorality or just being bad for the sake of it, but at the same time, things that appear good at one level of evolution might not appear good at another level of evolution. So we can ask, rather than staying focused on whether this is a good thing or a bad thing according to society or moral judgment, we can just ask, does this serve our evolution at this point in time? And yeah, so Teal Swan has this phrase that I really like called the expansion path. Um, so we can ask, is this path or is this structure that we're on, is it part of our expansion path? Does it help us grow and expand into the person that we want to be, this fuller expression of the divine that we want to be, or does it hold that back? So to give an example from my own life, I studied two subjects when I was in college. I studied jazz and math, and I think math is actually the clearer example of this, even though I love studying jazz. So when I studied math, I wasn't deeply passionate about it. It just seemed like I was kind of fascinated by it, but also kind of knew that it wasn't my eventual trajectory. But I just decided to let myself take part in this process of learning this material, because I didn't wasn't really sure what else to do with myself or my consciousness at that point. So I viewed this as a kind of container where I participated in the process of learning the material, stayed with the discipline of the field. So there's a particular progression of courses that you need to take to be a math major and things like that, and a sequence of ideas and subjects that build up to it. And there's a certain discipline that goes with it. You have to do these problem sets every week and do a rigorous proof of different ideas and hand that in every week. So for I think it was about uh, yeah, so it was probably about 3 years that I was really taking this very seriously, as my main thing that I was working on in my life. And again, I knew it wasn't my eventual destination. I didn't want to be a great mathematician, really. I just knew that I needed to do something, and that was a good structure through which I could evolve. And so at the end of that 3 years, I could tell that I was ready for the next thing. I was ready for something more expansive, something that engaged my life force that engaged my sensuality more. But when I was in that container of mathematics, I used that structure to give me what it was going to give me, which is chiefly intellectual discipline, intellectual clarity, and kind of discipline and order in my life, and a lot of considerations like that, that it fulfilled very well. So it was a structure that served my evolution for a period of time when I didn't really have a lot of clarity on what I wanted to do beyond it. So just the same as with any other, now the values and benefits that I got from that situation are not the sum total of all values and benefits in total. It didn't really help me with my emotional growth. It didn't help me with my physical health. It didn't help me with any other number of things, but it did provide benefits that I wouldn't have been able to get by doing other things. Like if I went to the gym a lot, I wouldn't have gotten the benefits of intellectual clarity. So every structure provides for some benefits and doesn't provide for other benefits. And the question is, which are the ones that are really aligned to what your soul needs to do to grow and expand at that period of time? Um, yeah, and so the other important thing to note about is that as you go through one phase or one structure, the lessons that you learn from that one structure go on to build on each other so that you have more capabilities and more refinement to bring to the next structure and the next process you engage with in your life. So it's a cumulative process, and that's why you don't need to feel like you need to get everything done just through one structure. You don't need to get all your fulfillments, all your value, all your possibilities just in the one phase you're in, or the one job you're in, or the one relationship you're in, or anything like that. It's a cumulative process of gaining fulfillment through all the totality of our experiences that we go through. So a really interesting thing happens when we actually consciously select the structures that we participate in, as opposed to just letting them kind of fall in, as opposed to just falling into them by chance. So I want to give an example of the types of structures that we might work with, and yeah, just give some examples from my own life. So one such structure is the domain of values. So values are qualities that help us align with uh, the choices that we make, um, in order to that they tell us what's important so that we can make choices that align with them. So if you value family, then if you're given a choice between working another 20 hours a week at a demanding job or spending time with your family, you would say, well, I actually value my family more than the additional income that I get from participating in my job. So because my value is family, I choose this. Or if you value if you value excellence, then and you're training to be an Olympic gymnast, for example, then you might be confronted with the choice between spending an extra hour at the training gym versus going to see a movie with your friends. And you might really like your friends, but if you say, I actually value excellence more than I value hanging out with friends in a movie, then you might choose um, to stay at the gym for an extra hour and practice rather than go with your friends to the movie, even though you really like that too. So in a world of finite constraints and finite resources, we're always put in the position where we have to make choices to clarify our values and be clear about what we really do think is more important than something else. And our choices uh, tell us what our values are, but we can also make deliberate choices to say that I I choose to value this, and I will make choices that are in line with that as a result. So it can go either way. On one level, we discover our values. On another level, we choose our values. So I think it's not just one or the other. It's an interplay, because there is an element of your nature is innately constituted of certain values. At the same time, we have the free will to choose them. So again, it's a delicate there's a lot of subtlety in the direction of causality here. Um, but the point that I wanted to make was that right now I'm going through a period where I'm actually consciously changing some of my values. So for a long time, my top value was creativity, and I wanted nothing more than to be, a really creative person across different genres. I was a musician earlier in my life. Then I was really drawn to the idea of being a creative writer, a poet, and essayist. And I know that that's still going to be really important to me, but due to certain uh, circumstances of my life, it's becoming clear that I need to develop myself in more ways than just becoming a creative person. Because if I'm just a creative person, I don't get to develop all these other sides of my nature and master the aspects of, for example, dealing with the world financially. Um, so if I want to be able um, to uh, uh, to be able to be a well-rounded person that's able to not just be a creative person who creates interesting art, but also contributes to my own financial well-being. I need to make choices that are in line with another set of values. So some of the values that I've been contemplating that are more in line with that side of things are power, excellence, contribution, rather than just focusing on creativity. So creativity will always be important to me because I've spent so long kind of honing and refining that. But I find I don't need to deliberately cultivate that anymore because it's part of a reflex almost that I will continue to build that part of myself out. So how does this impact my day to day life? For example, for the past couple of months, I was working on a couple of different projects. I was working on my creative projects, poetry and essays, and I was also trying to get some business projects up. But because I valued creativity as the highest thing, there was a tendency for me to kind of focus on my creative projects and put my business projects in with together with the creative projects. So I might spend an equal amount of my day on both sides of things, but I'm actually seeing the need to actually focus almost invert the focus so that rather than saying I'm doing creativity and business, I'm actually want to do mostly business and just add the creative projects as kind of a, a side project. So again, it's a conscious shuffling of values because of a direction that I want to feel myself wanting to transform. So yeah, it's a deliberate decision to re-engineer my values, and it's not just a mental choice. It's a choice that feels like it's aligned with a lot of different layers of my being. Um, but uh, yeah, so we don't want to just kind of bulldoze ourselves. We want to have this process align with our soul, align with our thoughts, align with our emotions. And so I'll give some considerations closer to the end about how we can make good decisions about what really feels aligned to us when we're trying to consciously make these changes. So a second example of a structure that's kind of changing in my life is the spiritual teachers I follow. So I spent many years pretty much exclusively following the spiritual teachings of Sri Aurobindo and the Mother Amira Alfasa, and they were kind of all the spiritual sustenance I felt I needed. And I had this kind of a little bit snobbish attitude towards other teachers, like, oh, they're really not at the same level as Sri Aurobindo. I don't need to listen to anybody else. But actually, the past couple of years, maybe the past 2 years, I would say, I've actually been finding a lot of value in a lot of mainstream spiritual teachings, which is kind of surprising to me because I would have thought, in my kind of snobbish phase, I thought the progression was, you start with this kind of pop spirituality, and then maybe you graduate to the really refined, elaborate views of Sri Aurobindo. But I find myself going in the opposite direction. I love Sri Aurobindo, and I still consider them my main gurus, but I've been finding a lot of value in the teachings of Teal Swan, for example, Maharishika, Jeff Carrera, some other teachers like that. And I find that I benefit from their ideas, which apply to the problems of my life that maybe Sri Aurobindo and the mother didn't speak to, but also their energies, which are kind of different spiritual energies than Sri Aurobindo and the mother. So that's uh, another area where I find myself re-engineering my energies to say that actually, whereas I before I got all my spiritual sustenance and all my spiritual structure from Sri Aurobindo and the mother, now I can say, oh, actually, I want to participate in this, and I want to apply this idea to my spiritual life, and maybe I'll go on a retreat where I um, study with this teacher or that teacher and apply their and get their energy and insight into how I could further transform myself. So another structure that's kind of changing in my life is the activities that I'm undertaking. So I mentioned this change in my values from creativity to kind of the more business focused values. So I want to be changing my activities from this kind of really enjoying brooding at cafes and sitting with my books at the window and staring out the window and coming up with creative ideas to actually executing on business projects more. And I've been doing a little bit of that over the past couple of months, but I want to ramp that up even more. So this is a change in the structure of life whereas this kind of cafe brooding vibe, it led to a lot of expansion in certain directions, intellectual expansion, a feeling of freedom in my spirit. That was another thing I got from it, a feeling of creativity and joy that came out of it. But eventually I'm seeing that I need to cultivate other things. And there's other things that I feel that I'll get from working on business execution, for like a feeling of competence or a feeling of excellence or a feeling of powerfully mastering a certain area that I couldn't get from just sitting in a cafe and uh, reading my reading my history books or novels or whatever. So there are so many other possible structures you can look at in life that affect you. Each relationship can be thought of as one of these structures. Even ideologies can be thought of as a structure. Some people grow through being left wing and participating in left wing activist movements, and some people grow through being right wing and participating in right wing troll forums or whatever. And I think there's a lot of judgment about, some ideologies are good and some ideologies are bad, and there's a place for that kind of judgment. But it's important to notice that how is the ideology that you have, how is that serving your evolution? What is it leading towards in your life? And if maybe you are growing through ideologies or ideas that are seen as judged by others as bad, if it serves your growth and evolution, then that's what you need at that time, and you should continue going down that path. So the town you live in, the city you live in, the country you live in, those are all structures and scaffolds for your evolution. And some might serve you at different times because each culture, each town has a different value system that you can align with. Um, each goal you have is another structure. Every online community you have is a structure. Every therapist you have is a structure. So every aspect of your life can be kind of scrutinized as to whether it is facilitating your evolution or holding your evolution back. And the more you kind of think about, where am I aligned? Which of these structures is serving me and my evolution? The more you can actually leverage this kind of conscious restructuring process to grow more. So I'll close with a couple of considerations for yeah, applying this to your own life. So the first consideration I would give is that so far I've been kind of advocating the process of re-engineering and restructuring your life. But what you want to do is you want to make sure you've reached the end and gotten the full value of something, and you aren't just running away from obstacles, because that is another thing that can happen. You can get into this pattern of running away from structures when they get difficult, versus needing to confront the obstacles that are at hand. So there's not really any hard and fast rule for this. I can give an example from my life that to me illustrates the difference between a misalignment and an obstacle, but you'll have to make a case by case determination, consult your inner guidance about this, be really honest with yourself. When am I just running away from difficulties versus when have I reached the end of a path? So that misalignment versus obstacle case, I would point to the last job that I had as a technical support agent at a software company, and I I was just getting to the point where I could just feel the um, just this deep knowledge that this is not what I'm supposed to be doing. This is not what is aligned with my soul and my spirit. And it wasn't a feeling like I was engaging with the difficulties of the day and feeling the sense of like, okay, this is an obstacle that I can solve. It was almost the sense of like, I shouldn't even be facing this obstacle at all. So that's the difference. Is this obstacle something that speaks to you, that this is something I can solve? This is something I should be solving. This is something that has benefit if I solve it. There's something on the other end of it that I want to bring about that's at the other end of this obstacle, versus this feeling that I really shouldn't even be facing this obstacle. This is the wrong thing to even be pursuing. So that's the difference in energy I feel applied there. But again, you really have to just develop judgments and listen to your soul ultimately to tell you when you've actually reached the end of a path versus when you're just running away from an obstacle. So another consideration is authenticity. So you know when something is the right path for you when you feel like you can show up to it authentically and claim it. But if you feel like you're constantly being inauthentic, then that's a sign that either you need to develop the strength to be authentic, or you need to change the situation. Um, so if you feel that there's really no way to be authentic, that and be a part of the situation, then that tells you that that's really not the situation for you. But if you feel that you can actually make some changes to be more authentic, then that's an area of maybe continued growth, like the last point. Make sure you haven't reached the end of trying to be authentic in a situation, um, but see if you can be more authentic. And if you can't, then that tells you it might not be the right place. And the last thing I'll leave you with is the idea of trying on structures to see if they fit. So some things that in the world involve a lot of commitment and involve kind of putting a, if you put a down payment on a house and start paying a mortgage, then that you're very locked into a certain path, and it's comparatively difficult to get out of it. But a lot of things in life you can actually kind of try for a little while and see if it fits, and if it doesn't fit, then you know that that's not the structure you want to work with. So recently, I took some part-time work just to see how I liked it, and I liked some things about it, and some things uh, felt a little bit off. So I decided to not do that, and it was pretty low stakes. Um, to we didn't leave anybody hanging, or um, yeah, it wasn't too controversial to move on. So yeah, if you can just try something to see if it's a good fit for what you're trying to do at a certain time, that's a good way to explore whether a given structure is a good fit for your evolution at any given time. Yeah, so I hope this was interesting, enlightening, useful in some way. And if you liked it, please like and subscribe, and tune back in next week for more insights. Yep, thanks for listening. Bye.